Welcome to our channel Celebrity Reports. Lawrence Welk lived a double life for 30 years and no one knew until now.
There's something unsettling about a man who smiles too perfectly. The kind of smile that never slips, never falters, never tells you what's really going on underneath. For decades, Lawrence Welk was that man. Warm, gentle, predictable, he didn't just host a show. He created a world. A soft, glowing space where nothing bad ever seemed to happen. Where the music floated, the laughter felt safe, and time itself seemed to slow down just enough for people to breathe. But here's the uncomfortable truth: worlds like that don't exist naturally, that they're built, and more importantly, they're protected, because behind that carefully crafted calm, behind the famous champagne music, there was another side to Lawrence Welk. Not scandalous in the way you might expect. Not explosive, but controlled, guarded, almost hidden in plain sight. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. To understand how this double life began, you have to go back, far away from the bright lights of television. Back to a small farm in North Dakota. Welk was born on March 11, 1903, into a poor immigrant family. They spoke German at home. Money was scarce. Comfort was rare. Life wasn't about dreams, it was about survival. As one of 8 children, he learned early that nothing would be handed to him. Work came first. Always. There's something about growing up in that kind of environment: you either break under the pressure, or you become incredibly good at controlling your world. For Welk, control became everything. Music wasn't just passion, it was structure. It was order in a life that had very little of it. When he picked up the accordion, it wasn't just an instrument, it was a way out. But even then, there was a trade. His father agreed to buy him that accordion, but only if Lawrence promised to stay and work on the farm until he was 21. And he did. He honored that promise. That tells you something about him right there. Loyal, disciplined, patient, but also someone who learned to suppress what he wanted in order to maintain stability. And that pattern never really left him. When he finally stepped into the world of music, he didn't just want success. He wanted control over how that success looked, felt, and lasted. And eventually, he got it. The Lawrence Welk Show became a massive hit. Millions tuned in. Week after week. Year after year. Everything about it felt safe. The performers smiled. The music was light. Nothing was unpredictable. And that was the point. Because while the world outside was changing fast, Welk's world stayed exactly the same. But maintaining that kind of perfection, it comes at a cost. Behind the scenes, Welk was a very different man from the one audiences saw. He wasn't harsh for the sake of it, but he was exacting. Every note mattered. Every movement mattered. Every detail had to fit his vision. He chose performers not just for talent, but for how well they fit the image he was building. If something didn't align, it didn't stay. Simple as that. And the people around him understood this. There was respect, yes, but also a quiet awareness that this world only worked if everyone played their part perfectly. No surprises, no deviations, because even a small crack could break the illusion, and that illusion was everything. Then there was his personal life. Or maybe it's more accurate to say, the version of it people were allowed to see. Welk kept things private. Extremely private. Not in a mysterious, dramatic way, but in a controlled, deliberate way. He shared just enough to maintain the image, but never enough to disrupt it. It's almost like he built a wall between who he was and who people believed he was. And over time, that wall got stronger. Think about what that does to a person when you spend years, decades being seen one way but living another. Not necessarily lying, but filtering. Always filtering. That kind of life doesn't explode into chaos. It becomes quiet, routine, lonely in a way that's hard to explain, because people love you, but they don't fully know you. And maybe that's exactly how he wanted it. Or maybe it's just what he became used to. That's the complicated part. Calling it a double life makes it sound dramatic, like there was some hidden secret waiting to be uncovered. But the truth is more subtle than that. It wasn't about hiding something shocking. It was about maintaining something fragile. The version of Lawrence Welk the world adored couldn't exist without constant care, constant discipline, constant control, and he gave his life to that. But here's the question that lingers. What happens when the role you play becomes the only version of you people accept? Do you hold on to it? Or do you start losing pieces of yourself inside it? For Welk, it seems like he chose to hold on tightly. For 30 years he maintained that image with incredible precision. Through changing times, through shifting culture, through an audience that slowly began to outgrow the kind of world he represented. And still he stayed the same. That's not easy. In fact, it's incredibly difficult because it means resisting change over and over again. It means saying no to evolution. It means protecting a version of reality that feels safe, even when the real world doesn't. And maybe that's why people loved him so much. Because he gave them something they couldn't find anywhere else. Consistency. Comfort. Control. But at the same time, that's also what made his life so complicated, because the more perfect the image became, the harder it was to step outside of it. And maybe he never really did. When you look back now, knowing all of this, that famous smile feels a little different. Not fake, but practiced, refined. Almost like a performance that never fully ended, even when the cameras stopped rolling. And that's what makes this story so fascinating, that it's not about scandal, it's not about secrets in the traditional sense, that it's about identity, about what happens when a person becomes so good at being who the world expects them to be, that there's almost no space left for anything else. Lawrence Welk didn't just build a show, he built a version of himself that the world could rely on. And he protected it for decades. But in doing so, he may have created a life where the line between who he was and who he needed to be slowly disappeared. And that leaves us with one final thought. When people remember him, they remember the music, the warmth, the calm, but they don't always see the discipline it took to keep that world intact, or the cost of living inside it. Because sometimes the most powerful illusions aren't the ones meant to deceive others, they're the ones we create to hold ourselves together.
That's for today's video. So if you like this video, don't forget to like, subscribe and share. See you next time.